Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a corporate transformation that is, frankly, mind-bending. How exactly does a legacy brand, one whose entire DNA is built on traditional fossil fuels, adapt to a rapidly changing, eco-conscious world? Today, we're breaking down Indian Oil's marketing strategy to see exactly how an oil giant is actively rewriting its own playbook to become a modern energy innovator. It's a story of incredible scale, brand evolution, and strategic foresight. Let's get right into it. All right, let's kick things off with a number that's honestly a little hard to wrap your head around: 63,000. That staggering number represents Indian Oil's customer touchpoints across India, according to their financial year 2024 to 2025 reporting. We're talking about a truly colossal scale here. To put that into perspective for you, with over 40,000 retail outlets alone, they have more physical locations than many massive global fast food chains combined, reaching into almost every single corner of the country. This isn't just a large business, it's an omnipresent infrastructure network that most brands can literally only dream of. And because of that scale, Indian Oil isn't just a player in this market, they are the absolute Goliath. Looking at the domestic petroleum market, they own a massive 41.52% share. Just think about that. They own nearly half the market in a massively populated country. In that same reporting year, they sold an astounding 84.96 million metric tons of petroleum products. When we talk about their strategy moving forward, we really have to keep this sheer foundational dominance in the back of our minds. Section 1. The Energy of India. So, how exactly do you manage and market something so massive? Well, you become a pillar of national development. Indian Oil leverages its incredible scale to position itself not merely as a commercial vendor trying to sell you a commodity, but as the actual foundation of trust and nation building. Just look at their positioning statement: in every heart, in every part. This emotional brand promise connects Indian Oil directly to everyday Indian life. They aren't just fueling cars, they are fueling the entire economy. They serve everyone from the individual scooter owner dropping their kids at school to giant manufacturing industries, defense, agriculture, and the aviation sector. They're deeply tied to the everyday functioning of the country, meaning they most likely power the supply chains of almost everything you buy. Moving on to Section 2, the marketing arsenal. Now, having a great emotional hook is just step one, right? How do they actually market to such a diverse consumer base without losing their core identity? Well, this brilliantly illustrates their approach: a highly structured brand architecture. They don't just use one name for the whole shebang. Instead, Indian Oil acts as the overarching master brand, the energy of India. But then they break it down for specific needs. Indane is positioned for your everyday household cooking LPG convenience. Servo is their dedicated lubricants brand for engine protection, and XP100, that targets the premium, high-performance fuel market. They use these distinct sub-brands to turn a massive, somewhat faceless corporate entity into relatable, specialized, everyday household names. And once they get you into their ecosystem, the goal was pretty simple: make sure you never want to leave. Enter the loyalty loop. Indian Oil operates distinct loyalty programs like Extra Power for commercial fleets and Extra Rewards for retail consumers. Their objective is to seamlessly transition you from a totally occasional customer to a repeat customer, and finally to a fiercely loyal customer. Because petroleum pricing is so heavily regulated and influenced by global crude prices, they can't just lure you in with flash sales like a clothing store. These programs help them compete on continuous value and customer centricity, rather than getting dragged into purely price-based wars. Which brings us to Section 3, redefining the petrol station. Even with brilliant branding and loyalty loops, Indian Oil's biggest competitive advantage is undoubtedly its physical distribution network. Those 40,000 plus retail outlets are currently undergoing a massive and totally necessary evolution. Historically, a petrol station was just a place to buy fuel. You pull in, fill up, and leave. But as we see here, Indian Oil is actively transforming its footprint into hubs for mobility, convenience, service, and brand experience. In the 2024 to 2025 financial year alone, they added 28 new wayside amenities, bringing their total to 68 major traveler destinations. They literally want to be the place you intentionally stop to rest, eat, and recharge, both yourself and your vehicle. But all of this brings us to a massively important, kind of existential question. Take a second to really think about this. How does an oil giant survive the EV revolution? What happens when your entire historic dominance, your entire network is built on fossil fuels? and the world suddenly decides it needs to move away from them. Let's explore that in Section 4, Navigating New Market Threats. Because despite their colossal scale, Indian Oil is facing an absolute perfect storm of disruptions right now. First up, obviously, is the existential threat of the EV transition actively shrinking traditional fuel demand. On top of that, they're battling highly agile private sector competition from companies like Reliance and Nayara Energy, who can pivot much faster. And they're trying to do all this while maintaining quality consistency across a sprawling 60,000-plus touchpoint network. Add in rising environmental expectations, especially from Gen Z, who heavily prioritize digital, personalized, and sustainable brands, and this legacy company is being forced to completely rethink its entire playbook just to survive. Which leads us to Section 5, the future energy pivot. Here's where things get really fascinating. Indian Oil is actively rewriting its DNA, shifting from a traditional oil company to a modern integrated energy company. And they aren't just talking a big game in boardrooms, they're putting real physical infrastructure into the ground. Look at this green push from FY 24-25. 13,614 EV charging stations, 37 battery swapping facilities, and an incredible 89.2% of their massive retail outlet network has been solarized. These are highly tangible, honestly surprising facts for a legacy oil giant. They are physically investing in India's transition to net zero, backing up their new marketing pivot with actual green infrastructure. So how do they pull this off long term? Well, their strategic playbook requires a few bold moves. They need to build a distinct Indian Oil mobility EV brand, shift their focus toward digital personalization through tools like their Indian Oil One app and Viba chatbot, and absolutely continue transforming those physical stations into true convenience hubs. They've also got to increase youth-oriented marketing, all while heavily investing in biofuels, green hydrogen, and renewables. This entire strategy connects digital innovation directly with on-ground convenience. Ultimately, they're trying to make sure your next road trip in an EV feels just as seamless and supported by Indian Oil as it did in a gas car. So the crucial takeaway here is that their entire transformation strategy really boils down to this single, powerful idea: energy available everywhere, for every kind of Indian mobility and lifestyle. This is the ultimate summary of Indian Oil's necessary evolution. They are taking their historic promise of simply providing you with fuel and brilliantly upgrading it to provide comprehensive energy solutions for whatever you drive and however you choose to live. Which leaves us with one final, lingering thought to chew on. We've seen the massive scale, we've seen the highly structured marketing architecture, and we've seen the aggressive physical pivot toward renewables. But the big question remains: can a legacy fossil fuel giant truly lead the green energy revolution? It's a monumental challenge that's going to define the next decade of mobility. But as we've seen in this explainer, they certainly have the network, the trust, and the strategy to give it their best shot. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the energy of India's future. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.